Good morning, everyone. This is on a timer, it seems, so I'll just walk back for a second. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nabile, Safdar. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is our pleasure to be here with you at the DPA meeting here in sunny San Diego. My name is Nabile Safdar. I am the board chair of the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine and the chief AI officer at Emory Healthcare. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about the resources available for like-minded clinicians, pathologists like yourselves at the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine. And we're going to talk a little bit about, I love the theme that the DPA has put together, from pixels to patients, what some of those resources are, and then have a little bit of a conversation. So you're going to meet later on our SIIM panelists, who will be Dr. Bui, myself, Dr. Chen, Mohamed Hussein, and Dr. Karpinski. And after the first three speakers, then we'll come up on the stage and we'll get started. The first thing I want to talk to you about is what I like to call strategic technical leadership, specifically around the need for interoperability and standards. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I got a call from our head of breast imaging, and she was very upset. I'm supposed to be in charge of informatics in this department. And she was upset because women were complaining if they went from our institution to another institution with their breast tomosynthesis, their DBT studies, which we were embarrassingly still burning on CDs. The other institution couldn't read our studies, and we couldn't read their studies, which meant that women had to get repeat scans, sometimes additional biopsies, long delays, a lot of anxiety. You can imagine if you're waiting for a diagnosis to figure out whether you have breast cancer or not, the last thing you want to hear is that, oh, sorry, we're not interoperable with our neighboring system across the street. This is why we must collaborate across imaging specialties. We have shared challenges. There are shared technical challenges. Our files are complex. Our images are complex. We have a shared interest in developing and deploying AI tools that scale across the enterprise. We're going to the cloud. In my institution, pathology is the reason we're taking imaging to the cloud. There is value in having shared infrastructure and standards, or at least coordinating to get to that point eventually, mostly for our patients. The individual radiologists, ophthalmologists, cardiologists, pathologists, others can do their job just fine without standards. But it does hurt our patients when there isn't interoperability, when a pathology slide isn't available in the generic EMR viewer for all to be able to consume. This collaboration can lead to better interoperability, to better scalability, to better safety. Most of you are familiar with the mainstays of interoperability in medicine: DICOM, DICOM Web, HL7, FHIR, and integrating the healthcare enterprise profiles that help navigate the playbook for how these can work together. If you're not familiar with IHE, I want you to know that IHE has specific profiles for pathology and lab medicine that help define how different systems in LIS and image management system, PACS or VNA, could work together with the EMR, et cetera. In these situations, FHIR helps manage context, DICOM can help manage images, and IHE can help manage the workflow. And we have seen that this has led to real-world success. Connectathons now have dozens of vendors and others working together to make sure that they're able to interoperate across LIS and whole slide imaging workflows. Now, I want to compliment Dr. Gershkovich, who I don't know personally, for a really well thought out and innovative and risky editorial, which he shared in the Journal of Pathology Informatics, that sees pathology as an opportunity for a new, fresh start, to introduce potentially a new standard that would take advantage of new modular architectures to be able to do things more efficiently. I think it's brave, and Dr. Gerskovich shows a lot of leadership in having some really thought-provoking ideas in this editorial, in this letter. He recommends a modular architecture, proposes the security overlay that's built in, and highlights variability in DICOM implementations, which require conformance statements to see exactly how a vendor is implementing. An excellent editorial, I think, really, which contributes to the state of the science and the conversation. I also admire Dr. Clooney and also admire the members of the working group for DICOM, who are meeting here this morning, who then, in response, talked about how they disagreed with Dr. Gerskovich's assertions and why DICOM is the right way to go. In some of these responses, they have responded that there is extensive extensibility for DICOM. It's able to incorporate modular structures without losing coherence. The Working Group 26 members reinforced that DICOM remains the optimal standard for digital pathology representation. They basically said that it supports dual mode TIFF and DICOM workflows already, which helps us to take advantage of the speed and efficiency of the TIFF workflows while also maintaining the interoperability that DICOM brings. This is what scientific debate, this is what scientific communication is about. An exchange of ideas, a respectful exchange of ideas, an acknowledgement that when there's new modalities, as digital pathology is in this journey, there may be a need to veer away from standards for some time, but in the long term, I'm shameless to say I am Team DICOM. I believe that this is the right approach for us in the long term, while acknowledging the challenges that it's had, but in the long term, for our patients' sake, this is the type of interoperability in the community we want to be with. What are some practical steps that you, running a digital pathology practice, or being on its journey, or being a vendor, or being a nonprofit in the audience can take? Adopt DICOM, whole slide imaging, and annotation objects. Look at their published conformance statements, recognizing, in my view, those conformance statements actually are evidence of how it can be flexible, even though they're not always 100% uniform. Use HL7, use FHIR for reporting and result management, and encourage participation. If you're a vendor, do it yourself. If you're a customer, encourage your vendors to participate in the Connectathons for multi-vendor validation. And if you are a pathologist or a pathology vendor in the audience, we want you to know that SIIM, the Society for Imaging Informatics and Medicine, welcomes multiple specialties, already has active participation from pathologists, dermatologists, ophthalmologists, radiologists. I would be lying if I didn't acknowledge that SIIM started in radiology because radiology did their digital transformation about 2 decades ago. But that even radiology has recognized that it can't do it alone. This expertise, this marketplace of ideas that comes when there are multiple imaging informatics specialties coming together, helps drive an agenda beyond the needs of one department to the needs of our patients. And that's my closing message here, that our patients don't care about TIFF versus DICOM. If you talk to them about these issues, they would say, whatever, I just need my breast tomosynthesis images to be visible and viewable when I go to the surgeon who's in a different system. I just need my second opinion for the whole slide imaging to be easily exchanged by some expert who's in a different city than I am. I just need my oncologist to be able to look at the results, be able to bring up in a tumor board these slides very easily. And that's the underlying interest, for pathology results to seamlessly flow to oncology, radiology, primary care, and even our patients. And I believe that DICOM, FHIR, and IHE are the rails that make that possible, which will lead to safety, speed, and trust. With that, I'm going to hand it over to the next speaker, Mohanad Hussein, who will tell you a little bit about SIIM's virtual hospital simulator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I should start by introducing myself. So my name is Mohammad Hussein. I apologize, that's not a typo. That's my name. It's with double N's. I wear multiple hats. I'm here this morning to talk to you about a tool that I serve as a technical advisor to, which SIIM recently built. It's a tool for training people on the newest, latest, greatest standards in informatics. We've just unveiled this about 6 months ago, and we are hoping that this community will also find this useful as well. So, first things first, welcome to the acronym soup. You're now part of the interoperability family, where you're hearing acronyms like IHE, DICOM, HL7V2, HL7FHIR, which is pronounced fire, in case you have not encountered it before. So if you hear us talking about fire, we're not talking about literal fire. That's the geek fire. Okay, there's a lot of fire puns, by the way, we can make here, but I'll try and keep my humor in check. This is one example of one of the integration profiles that Nabile alluded to, which is the DPIA, Digital Pathology Image Acquisition Workflow, right? So this is a workflow that calls for how an order can be placed, an order can be satisfied with images and captured, and reports are created, and so on and so forth. And how do you go about doing these things in a sandbox that's controlled rather than just jumping into doing this in production or in a hospital environment? And that's exactly why the virtual hospital simulator exists. It's a tool that allows the learners to do things and learn by doing. You're actually hands on the keyboard trying things in different imaging informatics standards. It has a number of built-in exercises that we carefully curated for you, along with data sets, but you can also create your own, both data sets and exercises. And last but not least, it is cloud-based, completely web-based, so it is accessible to anyone and everyone, 24/7, 365. Now, this is a tool that's mostly aimed for instructors who are teaching lessons. SIIM does offer a suite of courses in imaging informatics. Of course, you're more than welcome to attend these. But if anyone here is looking to make use of this tool, it's mostly aimed at the instructors who want to teach students. So you can come into this tool, use your existing exercises that we have, or you can create your own. Again, you can use the data that we've curated, or you can supply your own. And then within the tool, we have a number of tools and features that you can also string together any way you like. And here I'm going to show you some of these tools. So first things first, on the left-hand side, you see over here, you've got room for the instructor to put instructions to their students. Here are the steps I want you to try, create an order, push an image, etc. And then the students can then follow these steps. And then on the right-hand side, you can have one or more of these tools. Now, obviously, as you can see, this is a pathology image over here. So we do have, that's actually one of the tools, is the image viewer. And in this case, along the message that Nabile just gave you, if we can all together be using DICOM, this is a viewer that supports radiology images, cardiology images, ophthalmology images, and of course, as you can see, pathology as well. So it's a one-stop shop that you could teach everyone in the enterprise in this case. In addition to the DICOM viewer, we actually have a DICOM editor. So here you can upload a DICOM file, and you're able to see inside that DICOM file, but also interact with the DICOM file. You can actually add attributes, remove attributes, or even edit some of these attributes. So you can use this to string together exercises that allow people to learn the insides of this DICOM format. Additionally, as you know, DICOM is also standard for communication. So here you can also do things like DICOM transactions. So I don't know if everyone here understands the DICOM jargon, but cfind is basically when you query to search a system for something. So in this case, for example, we're searching for a patient with first name Sarah, last name Sim, and you can see there's 14 results found. So you can interact with this, and you can do the different DICOM transactions to try it out. Again, learning by doing is what this is all about. We move on to the HL7 version 2. So that's the language that's typically used today to place orders, send reports, stuff like that. As you can see, this is what an HL7 V2 message looks like. It's a little scary. Trying to read this by hand is not usually very pleasant. So one of the things we've done is we've actually got a parser here that presents the message in a more ideal format. And then what it does is it actually makes each of the individual fields clickable. So in this case, for example, once you've played around with the text, you can click on the patient name, and it'll actually tell you that this is the patient name, and it'll tell you the different parts of the patient name that are in there. It also has the option to do transactions. So just like with DICOM, you can do transactions, sending and receiving. You could do something similar here. So in this case, that HL7 message that I showed you a minute ago was sent into the backend system. As you can see here in the lab, it was actually accepted with an acknowledgement back. Last but not least, you've heard a lot about FHIR. And one of the things we have here is also a FHIR client. So FHIR is a REST-based API, so it's HTTP-based. And in this case, this is performing a search for a patient with a family name of SIIM. As you can see, this returns a bundle with a bunch of entries in it. So again, a tool for you to actually learn by doing more than anything else. I'm hoping every one of you here will take it for a spin. You can use a QR code or just go to this URL. We also have Barry in the back of the room. Barry, you want to wave? So he's the man. He's got a booth in the exhibit hall. You can go and have a demo, talk to Barry about getting access and being able to try it for yourself. And with that, I want to thank you, and I want to introduce Dr. Elizabeth Krupinski to the stage. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. As Hussein said, I am Elizabeth Krupinski. I am a professor and vice chair of research at Emory University in radiology, background experimental psychologist. So I'm interested in sort of the user side of just about everything in life and human factors. And I've actually done quite a lot in the pathology space, in telepathology, and worked with actually several of you over the years. So I am also, and the hat I'm wearing right now, is the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Imaging Informatics in Medicine. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the journal and why it might be of interest to folks here. So again, that's just the intros. A little bit of our history. Originally started out as the Journal of Digital Imaging. And a couple years ago, we transitioned to the Journal of Imaging Informatics in Medicine because it really did, you know, things changed with time. And the Journal of Digital Imaging just didn't quite make sense anymore, and it wasn't really aligned with what we were really heading towards. It is the official peer-reviewed journal of SIIM. And has been since its inception. And SIIM was originally known as RISC, and then it was SCAR, and now it is SIIM. So it has changed over the years as well. Radiology, what did RISC stand for? Information Systems and Computers, I think. SCAR was the Society for Computer Applications in Radiology. And then when we did switch to SIIM a number of years ago, it was to express sort of the changing world, that it wasn't just about radiology, it's imaging informatics and medicine. Our goal really is to disseminate everything about imaging informatics to a wide variety of folks, and again, not just in radiology. Techniques, research, clinical practice, engineering information, just about any topic you can imagine that has to do with imaging informatics. Volume 1 actually came out back in 1988. When it was JDI, and the original and founding editor was Roger Bauman. And at that time, it really was all about PACS. Those were obviously the very early days of digital imaging, of PACS, and that is why RISC was formed, and SCAR, and then SIIM as well. But that was where the journal came into play as well. And again, it was very much radiology-oriented, although it did take articles from different specialties as well. It has had other editors since Roger. Steve Horry, Janice Honeyman-Buck, and David Arvin preceded me. And then I became the editor a couple years ago, and my deputy editor is Victoria Bernowski. And so we've had very good long editorialships, which I think speaks well to a journal when people are willing to stay on for several years. We started out with 4 issues per year, and every now and then we'd have supplements. For example, we would publish the abstracts, extended abstracts from our annual meeting in the journal as well. And then in 2008, we went to 6 issues per year, which is where we are now. It is fully digital and online. I was just talking to someone before. I was 23 years at the University of Arizona before I moved to Emory 10 years ago. and I had practically every issue of JDI and then JIM and a whole bunch of other journals as well. And then when I moved from Tucson to Atlanta, I went through that painful process at first of kind of throwing them all in a bin, and then it actually felt very cathartic. But then it did go on digital, fully online, so now I don't feel as guilty anymore. Our current impact factor is 3.8, which in this field is really quite respectable, I think. This is just a variety of the topics that we cover. It really is not just the hardcore development and the algorithms and the math and all that. That's in a number of articles. But we also cover a whole variety of things, and everything from the user side of things to human factors to education to telehealth imaging, data science, archiving, standards. We have a number of joint and official white papers with various societies that come out as well, and position papers. So you can really publish a whole variety of things in the journal. We have developed collections, and this is one on pathology, and we developed this in collaboration with some of our pathology colleagues, and the collection really just kind of captured everything from 2025 that was already published, a couple from 2024. But if you look at some of these titles, you can see that there's a whole variety of topics out there, and these are just the collections. And when you get into pathology ones, the pathology collection, and these are like special issues. When you're online, you kind of do whatever you want. And so these are like special issues. And these are just the titles, like I said, of all the ones that were out there in 2025. And as you scan the titles and the authors, you can see it's quite an international journal, but the number of topics that people deal with is really quite amazing. And this is straight off the website in the collections tab. And as you can see, you start out with the titles, the publication information, and then one of the key images. And then you can just click on the link and it goes straight to the article, which is kind of nice. Those are just a few more of them. We also have some QR codes. We love QR codes. There's one to actually get you to the Journal for Imaging Informatics and Medicine. And then there is an upcoming conference on artificial intelligence in medical imaging on October 2021, basically up at Irvine here in California. Now you may ask yourself, and I'm kind of drawing on my talking heads if anybody knows what I'm talking about. I find increasingly that I mention bands from 10, 20, we got somebody in the back who knows what I'm talking about. So you may be asking yourself, well, why would I want to publish in JIM as opposed to all the great journals that are out there for pathology? I think one of the main reasons that you might want to consider JIM is because it is covering the breadth of articles. I showed you the pathology special issue. We are just in the process of putting out other ones. There's one in dermatology, there's one in ophthalmology, there's one in cardiology, there's one in visible light imaging, and then there's one in dental. Just kind of showing the breadth of the articles that we get. And each one of these special collections has at least 10 articles in them. And that's just over the past year. So if you're looking to reach a broader audience than just perhaps a pathology audience, because as Nabile said, a lot of what we're talking about in informatics really is common among all of us. So if that is perhaps one of your motivations, is to hit a broader audience, particularly perhaps with some of the educational stuff, with some of the implementation things that you're writing about, JIM might be something that you might want to consider. So again, maybe hit the QR codes or at least record them for future reference. So I thank you very much. Next, we're going to have our panel, and I'd like to introduce Marilyn Dewey, who's going to moderate the panel. I think everybody knows who Marilyn is, but with SIIM, she is on our board of directors. She is also the board liaison to JIM, and she's just a longtime friend of many of us, and so she's going to come up and moderate the panel for us.
Thank you. As you can see, the presentations are very short and to the point because we wanted this to be an interactive session. We want to connect with you. and to show you what's the possibilities at SIIM, because the slogan of SIIM is, that's where you belong. So this is very inviting topics. And if you have questions, let's see, you raise your hand, and then we have technical support people, and we'll hand you a mic, and then you will identify yourself and ask the question. So is there any question right now? All right, so while you're preparing your question, I just want to add a couple of things that Elizabeth just mentioned. If you become a SIIM member, your submission to the journal is completely free. Is that correct? The submission to the journal? Is there a fee to submit the articles?
Am I on? Yeah, so there is no fee to submit to the journal at all for anyone. And then once you get the paper accepted, it's free as well. If you want open access, that of course has a fee, and that's for members as well as non-members. But yes, submission to the journal and the review process, that's all for free, and then you just wait for the embargo to end, and it's open access.
Very good. And then the SIIMulator you're talking about, is there a fee associated with that?
Am I live? Okay. There are definitely fees to be associated with the virtual hospital simulator. It depends, so I don't see Barry. Oh, there you go, sorry. The light is blinding me. Barry is the one who can talk business. I'm the technical advisor, so I could talk technical stuff. But if anyone is curious, talk to Barry afterwards, he can tell you. I believe there is some kind of promotion offer right now where there's some free access being given while we kind of get mileage for the tool. So not to sound like I'm rushing you, but get on the bandwagon while you still can.
So let's just, yeah, thank you. Go ahead.
I should add that since we talked about GYM and SIIM membership, SIIM members do get access to GYM as part of the benefit of that membership, and it's an extraordinary resource to learn informatics.
Very good, very good. Because let's get to know the audience a little bit. Can people raise your hand? How many of you are pathologists? Wow, I would say more than 50%. How many of you are from industry? There's a portion. How many of you are trainees? Thank you. And how many of you are scientists? Very good. So this covers a lot of the people that we really try to reach out, because this is imaging informatics for all specialties. And because radiologist is doing this longer than pathologist, so DPA is collaborating with SIIM, trying to learn from each other. So then now under this tent, there is a room for pathologists. There are a lot of resources for us. Now, let's open up to questions. And then before people are standing up, identify themselves, I have some questions. So for Dr. Chen, and you are leading the AI strategics in Cleveland Clinic. So under you, there are different specialties, pathology, radiologists, and others. Everybody have their special interests and also their priorities. So from your perspective, do you see any good practices or strategies to find the common ground and then deal with these type of issues?
Thank you, Marilyn. Maybe I start by just quickly introduce myself a little bit, not being one of the speakers. My name is Howard Chen. I am a musculoskeletal radiologist at Cleveland Clinic, and I hold the title of Vice Chair for Artificial Intelligence for the Diagnostics Institute. That is a umbrella organization overseeing radiology, pathology, and laboratory medicine. So to answer your question, I think radiology, pathology, and lab have a lot more in common than initially meets the eye, and I will probably be the first to be skeptical of that statement before it actually happened. But overall, so first there are many different folks have different specific needs in the different departments, so that's absolutely true. So I don't know if there's, I think I saw one of our Cleveland Clinic folks in the in the audience a director for our Center for Diagnostic and Artificial Intelligence, and one of the work that came out of the pathology work is around physical slide, outside consultation. And that is a problem that's very specific to pathology. Radiology, you would get maybe a disc, a CD, very rarely now a physical film, but that is not true in pathology. And how do you get actual packages into the system in a reasonable fashion? So those are very specific needs. Laboratory medicine, anatomic pathology, and radiology have different opportunities. But then, once you start peeling back the layers of the onion, you see a lot more things in common than initially meets the eye. How do you, in the perspective of artificial intelligence, how do you deal with massive amount of data all at once? Radiology and pathology are the two subspecialties that deal with the largest data sets in any healthcare. And they're big in different ways, either individual large data examinations or large volume, high throughput examinations. We can learn a lot from each other just by figuring out. No one else understands when we say big, we're talking really, really, really big. We're not talking 1,000 clinical notes that may be 1 megabyte in total, right? So by putting our heads together, we trouble solve issues around latency, issues around bandwidth. We have same concerns around networking's fundamental capability to support the ever-increasing demand and scaling concerns for digital. So we have those things in common, and by pooling resources and our heads together and try to solve them together, we do a lot better.
So then what is your governance structure, talking about the AI initiatives and the strategies? How does it look like?
Yeah. So in Cleveland Clinic, the AI governance actually does trickle down from an enterprise level. So just like Dr. Safdar is the Chief AI Officer for Emory, Cleveland Clinic also has a Chief AI Officer who is neither a pathologist or a radiologist, but what's being created, that's right, I do this. But what has happened is then a governing structure was created, and different groups have representation on the panel. So there are lawyers, there are finance, there's compliance, and there are clinical representatives. And so I do have the privilege of serving as the diagnostics representative, as well a clinical representation on the panel. There are also primary care doctors and other physicians, and all the enterprise level, so anything that goes live that will touch patients has to go through approval through the governance structure. And we think of it in terms of administrative needs, technical needs, and business opportunity. So and then because lawyers are involved, it's also about patient safety, risk mitigation, and those kind of things.
Then in your role, what's your understanding of the challenges in pathology?
I think it's, in pathology, I feel that there is a lot of standardization challenges that are emerging. So we see a ever-increasing volume of data that are becoming digitized, and the data follows a variety of different formats. We see the vendor community evolve, sometimes going towards, and actually Dr. Safdar's talk puts a perspective on it, on different file formats, different data formats. Some of it's some is lossy compressed, some is lossless compressed. Lossless compression is extremely expensive and difficult to store, and that's a unique problem, a unique challenge in digital pathology. We know in artificial intelligence that tiny aberrations in the signal can create massive differences in the inference. So these are, it's called brittleness, and folks in the room may be even better versed than I am about that. But one thing I do know, when you create lossy compression, the level of compression creates tiny, imperceivable artifacts, but the asterisk on that imperceivable is that it's imperceivable to the human. It's not necessarily imperceivable to a computer algorithm that sees a pixel level signals. So I see that as a challenge that maybe not today, but one day we have to sit down and work together to resolve. What happens in the world when there are different standards and different generations of standards in which digital pathology is being pulled together, and now we have entire, again, a separate ecosystem in AI that has been designed to address each of those. And that can become I'll call it a technical debt. Imagine 10 years from now, every time you create an AI model, you have to make sure it's not brittle against the past 10 years of different standards that have gone through in terms of compression and data formats. So that's maybe in a nutshell where I see things going and how I feel really we have to think about addressing these early on so that when we go to that 10 years from now, we have a way to resolve those challenges.
Excellent, thank you. So the next question is for Dr. Safdar. So you're wearing two hats today. One is the chair of the SIIM, and then second is the chair, is the interim chief AI officer of your enterprise imaging. So can you address, when you deal with all different specialties now, not only you deal with the clinicians, also scientists and others, what's the challenges you are encountering, and what's the good practice standard that we should use?
Yeah, great question, Dr. Bowie. I would say the number one challenge that I encounter is highly variable understanding and knowledge of AI and the technology.
Yeah.
Standards, the infrastructure, the applications, and the underlying methods that we use in AI. So I see Dr. Jeff Smith in the audience, who's been a great partner in pathology in Atlanta with me. If everybody could be like Dr. Smith, who is smarter than smart, super sharp, and knows about the infrastructure, how it's coded, the difference between a CNN and a RAG and a VLM and an LLM and cloud architecture and TIFF versus DICOM, life would be easy, right? Because we speak the same language, we can quickly get an understanding, we may agree, we may disagree, but there's not going to be a fundamental gap of knowledge. When I'm working with people in all different departments, clinical departments, but also business areas, we're talking folks in access, people in marketing and communications, people in revenue cycle. The expectations of the technology can be wildly off sometimes. The understanding of the failure modes of a large language model, of foundation model, of the difference between HL7v2 and FHIR, for example, bulk FHIR, which is now becoming an increasingly common request for pop health or large-scale research, that understanding is often at a very baseline level, which is understandable because this is not people's primary job. It's not what they do every day. They may not have logged into Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini and used it a lot in their daily lives. And so sometimes there can be this magical thinking about what's possible quickly. And before going into an area who's requested the use of AI for a specific application or use case, what I find is we have to do a lot of level setting. What is your preparedness? Are your workflows centralized, or are there 15 different teams across 11 different hospitals and 80 different outpatient sites? Do you have your own informatician, or are you relying purely on our digital team as the source of expertise? Do you have buy-in from your department? Do you understand the difference between build versus buy? And with buy, do you understand the difference between a platform and a point solution? And do you understand the difference between capital and operational? These are practical concerns to get stuff done in a healthcare system. And they're not trivial, and they sometimes require a lot of remediation. Again, everybody, if I could clone 1,000 Jeff Smiths, that would be easy. But if not, then if they come to organizations like the DPA, which does an amazing job of elevating the industry, of elevating the level of discourse, of education, of shared best practices, and also SIIM, which does that not just for one specialty, but across enterprise imaging, where you can say visible light, derm considerations, how are they different from those who are dealing with echoes in cardiology, with CTs in radiology, whole slide imaging in pathology. And what are our shared concerns? How do we elevate the level of discourse for oftentimes it's the same 4 or 5 IT resources that are servicing all of our departments in an academic medical center or a healthcare system, you know, those folks need to be upskilled to be able to deal with our issues, and we need to develop leaders in our clinical areas who understand what they're asking for. And that's sometimes the biggest challenge.
Wow, those are excellent because you highlighted your pathologist, Dr. Jeff Smith. So Dr. Smith, be prepared, and you're going to have the microphone to ask the next question. But the first question comes from this way. Just a minute, the mic is coming.
Better. Yeah, thank you very much for your presentations. I'm Dr. Baca. I'm here as a member of CAP and the chair of the Council on Informatics and Pathology Innovation. I really liked your comment about magical thinking, and I think that even when we are in this room with so many people who are like-minded, there are an awful lot of assumptions about what we're talking about. So I thought it was very interesting that the biggest challenge was the size of the data. I would contend that in pathology, the real underlying biggest problem is the assumptions about the data that people use laboratory data for, and the assumption, for instance, that every lab test that comes out with a result is the same. So if I have a digoxin from one instrument, that the value there is comparable directly to another. So we really need to have standardization and interoperability at a test level with kits and lots, which doesn't exist, and that's a big push and pull for industry, and that I would love to see as a session so that we could all at some point figure out ways to push. The other thing that is interesting is when we talk about DICOM and vendors come out with instruments or situations that say that they're DICOM compliant, they're probably all telling some degree of truth. But not everyone is DICOM compliant the same way that another vendor's system is DICOM compliant. So while I understand the impetus to create yet another standard because our standards aren't working, I think that that pathology and radiology could certainly work together right now to make sure that if we use a word like DICOM compliant, that we actually know what that means. And it shouldn't be, I get to cherry pick from something in a whole big 900-page standard and then say, because I've got 170.12a down in my system, that I'm DICOM compliant, because inherently that is not a compliant or an interoperable system. Thank you.
Great point. Dr. Tabaka just addressed there's so much variation, and also we need to really get together to agree on certain terminology before we move forward. So is Dr. Jeff Smith ready to make some kind of comments? Is your pathologist is here too, right? Your pathologist.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Smith from Emory. Nabile does me too much credit. That was very nice of you. Thank you. I do have a question. While you were speaking, you know, from my experience with our digital pathology implementation at Emory, one of the biggest challenges that I think we've had, I have not seen discussed, and I was actually perusing the vendor list here while you guys were talking, and I did not see one laboratory information system vendor listed. And for us, and I guess if I had to target my question, it'd probably be to Dr. Kaprinsky because of your psychology background. You know, one of the biggest challenges we have at Emory is the kind of the orchestration of the pathologist work between the LIS and the image management system. Mm-hmm. And we cannot get the vendors to play ball. After 3 years into this, nothing has improved. And so I guess, is there more of a role for the laboratory information system vendors in this? And is there a difference between like the LIS and the RIS that accounts for this? Because I don't really understand how the RIS is used versus the LIS. I mean, I know how the LIS is used. You know, that's where we go to write our reports and order our stains and basically do everything but look at the actual histology.
Yeah. So thank you for your comments. And the question is compounded. One layer is the challenge to the DPA board. Next year, when we organize the meeting, we really need to pay attention to bring the LIS vendors into the fold. And they were in previous years, But we're going to make greater effort to bring them into this and into the conversation. So the second question is, how do you deal with that, your informatics system vendors in radiology? How do you bring them in?
It's increasingly a challenge. I will make a little tongue-in-cheek comment first around RIS systems, in that the field of RIS vendors is slowly shrinking just because of various EHR that have now expanded functionalities to encompass radiology information system capabilities. And so independent RIS companies are losing ground. And as a result of that, large EHR companies are less, I would say, less interested on one subspecialty's interest. They want the whole hospital's interest, right? They're an EHR company. So I would say that engaging the RIS vendors is a challenge, and it's an increasing challenge, because they're seeing fewer and fewer potential customers that they are able to engage with. That being said, I know that SIIM and other organizations, RSNA and other organizations, constantly reach out and try to include, be as diverse as possible in the vendors that are included in the exhibit halls. And also SIIM, I do know, actively recruit vendors to speak in an educational CME granting format. So not to pitch their product, but to pitch the science behind why their products is designed to support, or sorry, what science their product is designed to support, and how they do it, how are they compliant with the various standards, HL7 Fire, US CDI, and so on.
Very good. Additional comment?
Yeah, I'll just add on that I agree, Howard, with what you said. As the major EMR vendors have incorporated LIS and RIS functionality, we see fewer independents, and their roadmaps for improvement. There are mechanisms with most of the major EMRs to guide their feature roadmap, the use cases that we want, the functionality that we want. It does take really getting involved with that specific EMR vendor, going to their user group meetings, going to their expert group meetings, and becoming involved in their governance system to drive where they're going. I will say that one opportunity, whether for DPA, for certainly SIIM is already doing this, is we have one of the major EMR vendors actually have a pre-day meeting at our conference, because so many of the RIS, their RIS users, are at our conference. So they said, well, we don't usually have user group meetings other than at our headquarters, but you're all here, so let's come out to you. And that's an opportunity that we're happy to share notes on about how we can try to either do both, ask them to bring more LIS representation to that, or strategize together about how that could be done at CAP, DPA, et cetera, because we've found that to be a really valuable way for them to hear the voice of the customer about new feature functionality, and I think it's been influential.
This is an excellent suggestion. I will take it back to the DPA board. And the comments? Yes, please.
So one small thing I want to add to what was said here is, someone who worked his way through the ranks of the vendor community, I will tell you that as the customer, you have the biggest voice into what gets implemented and what gets put on the roadmap. However, I also don't want you to have unreasonable expectations. When you ask for something, they're not going to go and turn around and develop it the next month. Their lead times, unfortunately, are a little long. That being said, if you want a ray of hope, keep up with things like connectathons. I've actually personally participated in the recent Pathology connectathon, and it was really heartwarming to see the level of adoption that's coming. You can basically think of it, if I could use like car racing analogy, connectathons are like the Formula One of racing, and that technology eventually trickles down to real life. Like we all enjoy the push start button for our cars these days. That was developed in Formula One, eventually made its way. I'd say most of these things usually end up coming to you, a hospital near you, typically within a couple years, maybe 3. So just a little bit of patience, but keep applying firm pressure is what I would say.
Wonderful. And by the way, DPA has been collaborating with DICOM, and every year we will do a connectathon. And this year, again, there will be a report at the end of the meeting. So please let them know what what's your request? So they can work on it next year. So we have another question from the audience.
Hello, everyone. Peter Lewis, UIC Informatics and Surgical Pathology Fellow. Two questions. What resources does SIIM offer to its trainees,
Excellent.
junior members? And two, the second question involves enterprise imaging. At UIC, I was involved with a request for proposal for several vendors. And what I noted, and it's probably not unique to UIC, that certain specialties, radiology, have a bigger footprint. Maybe it's on account of their longer experience in terms of digital. But how do you get, not only just pathology, dermatology, ophthalmology, point of care ultrasound at the table to get the vendors to understand what their needs are? So it's not just one player driving the selection for the enterprising imaging selection.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for those questions. So the first question I'll briefly address. One of the reasons, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, membership for trainees is deeply discounted, if not free. It's free, I believe. Yes, thank you for confirming. So membership for SIIM for trainees, including grad students, fellows and residents and med students, is gratis. So that gives you access to things like webinars, which are coming online, on a frequent basis. The journal, yes, thank you.
Free access to the conference, too.
And free access to the conference, so if you're a trainee. The other specific course that I'll mention, yes?
So I'll specifically point out the SMIT, the SIIM Members in Training Committee. So as part of that committee, again, it's free for training. It's only for trainees, but there is a mentorship program that's built into that. That's designed so everyone essentially get out, we'll call it a big SIP equivalent. And so the SMIT committee makes sure that you're connected with the big SIP, and then also as you move out of training as a trainee, that you continue to have connections with new trainees that are coming in that share certain I'll call it fingerprint of their training as you. So for instance, if you're a dermatology resident or if you're a pathology resident fellow, then they try to match it up so that your little SIP or your mentee will have a similar line of interest. Doesn't always work perfectly, but that's a major goal of this program.
And what Dr. Chen is referring to, if you see on the upper left-hand corner, journey maps, the third row there is that SMIT pathway. If you didn't know what SMIT stands for, that's members in training, SIIM members in training. And then there's the NIC, or the National Imaging Informatics course. This is a virtual course that's offered twice a year. It is a collaboration between SIIM, RSNA, which is a radiology organization, and the DPA. And there is a specific, so there are several portions of that course which are common. So the base, standards, infrastructure, AI, these are common for all specialties. But there is a separate track with specific courses for pathologists, trained mostly by pathologists, with some of the leading pathology informatics faculty in the country. That will then give kind of deeper, explanations of the workflow. So that's another opportunity. There is a fee associated with that. It can be bought at the individual level or at the course level. But there's more information on the website about that as well. So
This could be an opportunity for DPA sponsorship also. So between the DPA and the SIIM, we should discuss that, right? Because the trainees usually don't have the deep pocket, but they're really eager to learn and sucking up all the knowledge. So we will support them as much as we can. So remove all the barrier for them to be able to learn and network.
And to the second question, and following up to the previous one, sometimes it's not just the LIS and the RAS and sort of that back-end stuff where you're going to find the best collaborations. Again, my background is all, human factors and so on. And so the vendors that I tend to deal with are the monitors, the folks who are doing sort of the other side of stuff, the facing the the user side, and I find them to be the most collaborative. And a lot of those are integrating a lot of informatics right into the workstation itself. And they are more often collaborative and interested in your viewpoints, I think, than sort of those back-end folks and certainly the electronic health record folks, let's be honest. They are more than willing. And I give Barco as an example. They are immensely interested in feedback, in developing honestly good, efficient, and effective workflows. And they're more than willing to work with you quite often on what you're after, as are most of the monitor companies. So those companies that are dealing with monitors, the workstation space, sort of developing the ergonomic environment, these are the companies that I would say, if you're looking for true collaboration to make your life easier when you're actually in there doing the work, those are the ones that really are the ones that are more willing to collaborate and get you to the user side of all that informatics stuff.
And then in-house counterpart of that, don't forget your medical physicists. If you are in a training program that has an in-house medical physics team, they're the ones that often get very serious about making sure that a diagnostic monitor is displaying accurate color and make sure that it's integrated as part of your part of the physician's workflow. So that's another resource. If you don't have a direct line to the vendors, look towards your medical physics team.
And also, and I don't know, it varies on what you have at your institution, but folks who are very much expertise in systems implementation. You may find them in your psychology department, you may find them in public health, they actually may be in your business school. But these folks, because there was a question earlier about workflow, and how do you actually optimize the workflow and the environment, these are the types of people you need to bring into the conversation as well, because they understand how to analyze what you're doing now and how does that have to change or be adapted to the new situation where everything is informatics-based and digital.
Very good. So when we're having a great time, having a very informative session, time just flies. Do you realize we're almost to the 1 hour talk, right? So let's give them a round of applause for their excellent presentations. Let's ask them just each tell us one thing they're excited about PathVision 2025 and what's the potential that DPA and the SIIM can collaborate on. We'll start with you.
All right. I am a technology geek, and I'm excited to share my knowledge, but also learn from everyone here about common tooling that we have in common, for example, for DICOM HL7. So the SIIMulator is one of them, but there are many others that we could use in common. So looking forward to having a lot of conversations with people here.
Excellent.
For me, I'm most excited about the theme, the focus on patients. So Pixel to Patients is this year's theme. The emphasis on, this is not just data, this is not just building a model, we're here to serve patients. It sounds cheesy, sure, but as I'll tell you, on a daily work as a radiologist, it takes some reminder that this X-ray you're looking at belongs to a patient. It came from a human being. And like to see that PathVision is focusing on, I'm really excited about a keynote that'll have a patient story. I'm really excited about some of the individual sessions that's going to focus on the patient's perspective on the emerging AI and access to slides.
Very good.
I think some of the greatest opportunity at DPA is to talk to the vendors and find out like, hey, what's the latest and greatest? What are you working on? Get that market intelligence, which it's hard to do if you're not at a meeting like this, and then do the same with the members of the DICOM Working Group 26 when you run into them into the hallway and be like, hey, what did you guys meet about this morning? I saw you weren't at my session. Tell me everything you discussed. And they're so generous with their time and their expertise. I find that really valuable.
Excellent.
And what I'm interested in and excited about is talking to all of you and interacting and finding out from your perspectives and there's somebody at our institution who's always talking about the pebbles in your shoes. The things that are really just making your life difficult that could probably be solved through a lot of this informatics stuff if it were done right. But in order to figure out how to do it right, we got to know what are those pebbles in your shoe. And so I would be interested from both the perspective of, someone who's out there, designing studies and so on, to figure out how can we then address those problems that you're experiencing. Because those are the ones that are most annoying, to be perfectly honest, because a lot of the other stuff, you kind of leave that to the Nabiles and the Howards and so on and hope that it works out. But I'm more interested in what is your experiences as a user, and how can we help that?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your expertise and your candid advices. And then for the audience here, we're really excited to share knowledge and connect with you. And then you may be making history with us this year at Pathology Visions 2025, because I think we're very close in breaking the record of 1,000 attendees to this meeting. So thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.